Chapter XIII. Bullets Fly. A half-mile or so beyond, a black cruiser lay at anchor at the mouth of a cove on the island side of the sound. She was broadside to, and one look at her was enough for Harry Cohen. "It is!" he cried. "We've got her, fellows." "Not yet," warned Phil as the fellows clustered from all parts of the boat. "That's her, but how are we going to get her back?" "Hadn't we better stop here, Steve, and decide what to do? Those men aren't going to give her up just for the asking, I guess." "Right," agreed Steve. "Go anchor, hon. Let her go as soon as you're ready. Now then, fellows, let's think what's to be done." The adventurer pulled at the anchor line with her nose, found further progress stopped, and slowly began to swing around with the tide. "There are 3 of them at least, according to the gasoline shack back there, and there are 12 of us, but if they have guns we've got 2 revolvers," said Perry eagerly. "Shall I get them, Steve?" "Yes, fetch them up here, but we don't want to use them unless in self-defense. Don't forget the cartridges, Perry. Now suppose we mosey up to where we can talk to them, fellows." "That's the ticket," agreed Wink Wheeler. "If they get to acting ugly, why, I guess there are enough of us to handle them." "I think the best way is to beat it right up there and tell them to hand the boat over." "And if they decline?" inquired Phil. "Go in and take it. And, as like as not, get shot full of holes." "No, thanks." This from Brownie. "How would it do for some of us to land and keep out of sight and come around back of them?" asked Cass Temple. "What are we going to do with them if we catch them?" Tom Cohen wanted to know. "Take them back and hand them over to the police?" "I don't believe they'll let us catch them," answered Phil. "Either they'll take to that small boat they've got astern there, or they'll try to make a dash past us." "Illustration, it is!" he cried. "We've got her, fellows. Much good that would do them." Harry shrugged his shoulders. "The adventurer can sail all around our boat." "We're not getting anywhere," observed Steve, who had been all the while watching the other craft attentively. "And they've seen us at last, for they're looking over the top of the cabin." "Well, let's do something," said Perry, who was back with the 2 revolvers and as many boxes of cartridges. "Can they go the other way, or do they have to pass us to get out of this place, Steve?" "They can go the other way for about 5 miles according to the chart, but they can't get out. There's a bridge there. And, anyway, I guess it's only navigable for small boats at high tide." "Perry, for the love of lemons, drop those things and let them alone." "They aren't loaded," said Perry, injuredly. "That's the kind that always blow your head off." "Well, what's the decision, fellows?" Everyone talked at once for a minute, and, at last, Phil said, "Why not do the natural thing and ask for our boat? Why let them think that we expect trouble? Perhaps when they see that the game's up they'll all give in sensibly." "That's the idea," agreed Harry and most of the rest. "Let's breeze right up to them and talk big. We'll never get the follow me byline here, anyway," said Steve, turning to the wheel. "Get your anchor up, hon. Give him a hand, someone. Wink, open a box of those cartridges and load the revolvers, will you? But keep them out of Perry's way. All right now. Settle down, fellows, and we'll try bluff." The adventure went on, and the distance between the 2 boats lessened rapidly. They could see 2 men watching them over the top of the cabin, but there was no sign of alarm visible aboard the Follow Me. When the adventurer was almost opposite the black cruiser, Steve threw out the clutch, turned the wheel and let her run shoreward. "We're getting out of the channel," he said to Harry. "Watch for sandbars." He slipped the clutch in again and again disengaged it. The 2 boats were some 20 yards apart now, and the men on the Follow Me were observing the newcomers unblinkingly from the cockpit. Steve leaned over the rail and sent a hail across. "Follow me, ahoy," he called. "We'll trouble you for that boat, please." For a moment there was no answer. Then one of the 2 men in sight moved forward and drawled, "Speaking to us, are you? What was it you said?" I said we'd trouble you for that boat, repeated Steve. It happens to belong to us, you see. This boat? That identical boat. Belongs to you. You've got it. That's a good joke, friend. We've owned this boat 3 years. Where do you come in? She's to follow me, even if you have painted her name out, and you took her from her anchorage in Plymouth Harbor last night. What's the use of throwing a full bluff like that? The man laughed hoarsely and his companion joined him. Run away, kids, he said finally. You're crazy with the heat. This boat's the Esmeralda of Providence, and she belongs to me and this feller. What do you mean, took her? Calling him a thief, are you? I'm not taking the trouble to. If you know what's good for you, you'll dig out of there and do it quick. Is that so? Drawled the man. Well, ain't that nice? And supposin' it don't suit me to hand over my boat to you? Then what you going to do? Take her, answered Steve quietly. There are 12 of us here and we've followed you all the way from Plymouth, and we aren't likely to let you bluff us off now. Come on, now, what do you say? Come on and take her, kids, was the answer. We're scared to death. The men thought that extremely funny and laughed a lot over it. Just then, Steve, leaning outboard over the railing, felt someone tug at his arm. Look at the middle port, Steve, whispered Phil. Steve looked. The nearer side of the Follow Me was in shadow, but a quivering beam of sunlight, reflected from the surface of the water, glinted on the muzzle of a revolver held just inside the open port. Every fellow under cover, said Steve quietly. That means you too, Joe. Duck. They've got a gun trained on us. Who's the best shot here? Wink, answered Joe. Give him one of the revolvers. Are you there, Wink? Yes, answered the other from the forward companionway. Get a beat on that middle port. You'll see a gun sticking through there. Don't shoot unless they shoot first. Better go into the other cabin. There's no harm in letting them see you, but don't keep your head exposed. Someone hand me that other revolver. On the other boat, Steve's silence was accepted as a confession of indecision, and a jeering laugh came across the water. The adventurer was drifting toward the shore now, and Steve turned and slipped the clutch into reverse and churned back a few yards. Then he faced the man again. You can't get away with it, you know, he said untroubledly. We can stay here as long as you can. If you run, we'll follow you, and at the first port we'll hand you over to the authorities. You've only got 30 gallons of gas and that won't take you far. If you have any sense, you'll pile into your tender and light out while you've got a good chance. It was evident that those on the stolen boat had glimpsed Wink's revolver, for one of the men leaned toward his companion and spoke in low tones, and their eyes sought the port. After a moment, the spokesman replied placatingly. Maybe you're right, sport. Guess you've got us this time. But this ain't any place to go ashore. Tell you what we'll do. We'll run her back to Gloucester and hand her over to you there. That's fair, ain't it? It doesn't listen well, answered Steve. You land on the other side there and you will only have to walk a few miles to a train. Yeah, walk about 6 miles across sand dunes in a sun hot enough to blister you. No thin doing sport. Take it or leave it. Leave it, thanks. For answer, one of the men climbed to the cabin roof and went forward. He's going to pull up anchor, warned Joe, peering over the rail. Steve's voice rang out sharply. If you touch that cable, we'll shoot. The men paused, stared across doubtfully, and went on. Can you hear me, Wink? Asked Steve softly. Yes, came from the after cabin. If he lays a hand on the anchor cable, shoot, but shoot wide. All right, Steve. Say, called the man in the cockpit, don't you start nothing because we got you covered. If there's any shooting, you'll get the worst of it. The man forward dropped to a knee, his gaze turned warily toward the enemy, and took hold of the anchor cable. As he did so, Steve whipped his revolver into sight and flattened himself against the bulkhead. A sharp report broke the silence, and a bullet sang its way across the Follow Me's bow. The man dropped the rope and sprang back along the roof to tumble frightenedly into the cockpit. From the cabin of the adventurer floated up the acrid smoke of Wink's revolver. The man at the stern of the other boat had instantly disappeared. "Look out!" shouted Perry from the forward cabin. "They're going to shoot from the ports. Come down from there, Steve." But Steve's hand was on the clutch, and as the adventurer began to go astern, his other hand turned the spokes of the wheel and the cruiser's bow came slowly around toward the Follow Me. "Come up here, Wink," he called, "and then put that hatch up all the way and keep behind it." He added his wing slip to his side. "Can you get them from there?" "Fine," answered the other cheerfully. "I'll try to keep our bow on. Careful not to kill anyone, old man. Shoot for their arms." "How can I when they're out of sight down there?" Wink complained. "All I can do is shoot for the ports." "Don't shoot at all unless you have to," Steve cautioned. "We don't want to knock any more splinters off her than necessary." "We're too near, Steve. The deck's getting in the way. I'll back her off." The adventurer retreated until Wink, his elbow resting on the closed cover of the chart box, could train his revolver on the Follow Me's ports. Several of the others emerged from the cabins and huddled from sight on the deck. "What's the next act, Steve?" inquired Phil. Steve shook his head. "I'm wondering," he answered. "About all we can do is keep them from running away until they talk sense." "Why not let them run? We can go faster than they can." "I'm afraid of tricks," responded Steve. "I don't know these waters, and I suspect that they do. They might manage to give us the slip as they did last night. I guess when they find they can't get away, they'll come to terms." Steve raised his head cautiously above the chart box on his side, and a bullet promptly plowed through the frame of the open window in front of him and went singing astern. "Rotten shooting," observed Wink, as Steve ducked to safety. "Shall I give him one, Steve?" Steve hesitated and then shook his head. "What's the use? You'd only plug a hole in the Follow Me's cabin. Wait until they show themselves." "Well, you take care not to show yourself," advised Wink, peering warily past the smokestack. "Those murderous pirates are shooting to kill, I guess." Another shot rang out across the dancing water and a bullet flattened itself against a pipe stanchion. "Guess you'd better put a shot into each of those ports," said Steve. "Maybe they'll keep away from them." "Sorry to damage your boat, Harry." "Bother the damage," said Harry. "Plug her full of lead if you like." Wink's revolver spoke, and, "Bullseye," he announced calmly. Another shot followed. "Got that one too," he muttered. "Can't see the other port from here, Steve. Smokestack's in the way." "You try it." Steve tried and missed, the bullet knocking a long splinter from the edge of the cabin roof, and at the same moment a pistol aboard the Follow Me barked, and Perry, sitting crouched on one of the seats, uttered an exclamation. Phil, beside him, turned anxiously. Perry's face expressed blank amazement as he pushed his right sleeve up and gazed at a wound from which the blood was spurting. "Gosh," he said oddly, "I'm shot."